Behold, my glorious supporter, Flipz, has requested some discussion about the major arcana. Flipz asks, I don't know how familiar you are with the Persona franchise, but in the series, most characters are associated with one of the major arcana of the tarot deck, with said arcana being represented as either in the upright position or the reverse position, and commonly featuring character arcs moving between the two. What major arcana do you think you're associated with, and what do you think it's upright or reversed for you? What position do you think it's in? After you make this determination, present it to your partner to be judged for accuracy. Well, okay, a few starting things. I'm a little bit familiar with the Persona franchise. I haven't played any of the games yet, but I'm looking forward to playing Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5 Strikers, probably on PC, maybe streamed, I'm not sure. Anna really likes tarot reading. I am not familiar with tarot reading. I'm mostly familiar with tarot as a gaming card deck. Tarot was originally just kind of a subset of playing cards. If you think about a tarot deck, there is a normal 52 card playing deck inside of the tarot deck. There are just more cards. Not to say that that's a problem or anything. That's just part of the origin of tarot as a, if you'll forgive the term, an occult activity. The origin is that it was originally a normal deck of playing cards. The game that you play with this deck is something that I have a lot to say about some other time. But anyway, I just thought I would tell you that tarot is a not insignificant part of my life. A lot of people I've been close to have really enjoyed it, and I have really enjoyed the game version of it. Well, again, I have a lot to say about it. So we'll go from there. I also briefly wanted to get to this thing about characters having character arcs that move from one state of the major arcana they are based around to another. The interesting thing about that to me is that Persona features a bunch of high school students, and so you're gonna get people who are in that sort of transitionary part of my life. On the other hand, I'm 27 and I've been self-employed for years, and so I'm not as easily going to resonate with both sides, or not that you're asking this, but have an arc that moves between them. Certainly, there were some as I looked through the major arcana meanings just from a website I found online, that I thought maybe I did once go through that transition, but at the moment I felt like almost every time it was, I strongly resonate with this one, and this one has nothing to do with me right now. So I just thought that was interesting, so I thought I'd bring it up. So I looked through all of them and picked out a few that I'll just talk about. So starting from, I'm just going in the numerical order, if you will. So the first one is the High Priestess Upright. The internet says that this one means intuition, sacred knowledge, the divine feminine, and the subconscious mind. The main reason this resonates with me is because I feel like most decisions I make are pretty clear, and something that I feel like a lot of people don't feel at my age, that I do feel, is that it's very rare that different motivations in my mind are conflicting. Usually my intuition is not only correct, is like, you don't know, but sensible. It's often aligned with my other interests. It's not like I have a desire, but then logically I need to avoid that desire. Or, I mean, obviously that happens to everyone sometimes, but a lot of the time those things are in line because it's so core to my values that those things be aligned, that you not be resisting something that you want for no good reason, unless it adds to your life in some way. The end goal is to enjoy your life, and so if you're resisting something and you would enjoy it if you didn't, and there wouldn't be any consequences to not doing it, I think that's bad. And that is not exactly what this one is, but I'm just saying, to me, my intuition and I are on good terms. The subconscious mind is also something that I love. I'm very, very interested in the sort of, not other me, but the entity in my head that crafts dreams that I have, and my relationship with lucid dreaming has been pretty complicated so far. Something I started doing during the pandemic, and has been a interesting ride so far. I am not much closer to controlling my dreams, lucid dreaming, but I feel much closer to my subconscious self, and that's actually pretty recent. I said a lot of these will have solidified. That's a fairly recent one. Um, the divine feminine is maybe just a shallow interpretation. I just don't resonate with a lot of a lot of the gender identity that my society put on me. It's always made me kind of uncomfortable and upset. And so, at least being able to respect the, if they're gendered on the surface, at least inside, the different parts of one's personality. The inner child came up in one of these descriptions too, and that's also something I think is important, whether I do a good job embracing it or not. It's always difficult to say. I'm not a psychiatrist, although it might not be the worst idea. The next one is the Hierophant reversed. This is personal beliefs, freedom, challenging the status quo. The Hierophant upright is basically religion and conformity. I hate these things more than it's justified to dislike them. I could not be more defined by overvaluing personal beliefs. In feeling like coming to the conclusion yourself is valuable in and of itself, even if it wastes time and effort over going through someone else's method. Even if you arrive at the same conclusion as somebody else, it's still better to get there yourself. I am the penultimate. One of my strongest beliefs is that being told a sort of an idea of how to live your life or be happy and accepting it is always bad. It is never good. Even if you agree with the idea, even if we somehow knew that if you went to go explore that idea yourself, you would then realize that you actually agreed with the same thing, I still think it's bad. I think essentially any source of authority is inherently harmful, and whatever benefits it confers, which I'm not crazy. I acknowledge that religion and any source of authority, tradition, has value, but it's always in a sort of value debt because of the damage that it does to people during their maybe largely formative years. But a lot of that carries over into people as adults. I view most of the rest of the world as being mentally inflexible because they bought too much into the ideas that our society presented to them. And I completely understand why. It was just a mistake. And I stick to that feeling very strongly. Now, again, I want to make absolutely clear that I don't begrudge anyone feeling that way. No. I personally am a person who simply can't accept anything except, my ideas that I figured out my own way. I love to get people's feedback, and the reason is because I like critiquing my own idea. If I wanted to accept what somebody else said, I actually found that paradoxically, people that like to accept other people's ideas, traditions, beliefs, that they did not forge on their own tend to be surprisingly unreceptive to critique because they need to sort of defend that idea that they just wholesale took from someone else. And while it might sound inflexible and stubborn to only believe in your own ideas, to me, that actually means that I'm the most receptive to critique because I want my idea to be scrutinized and refined. It's not static. It's not something to be held and never remove. The challenging the status quo part of the Hierophant card resonates to me because the most important thing to me is challenging my own status quo about something by getting feedback. And a major reason I decided to stream in the first place is because it means I will be given a constant barrage of other people's ideas for the time that I'm doing this. And I like that. That's what I want. To me, to become the person that I want to be, I need that. I have to be in an environment where I get enough feedback from people with different ideas that I can make my own ideas better, more complete, if you will. So the reversed Hierophant, I resonate quite strongly. By comparison, not that I don't understand what I meant about the upright High Priestess, but it makes it seem maybe a little, a little bit not so solid. One thing to note, I guess, because I mentioned the whole thing about some of these, maybe I went through that transition. I have always felt the way that I just described, even when I was very young. I was adopted, and my birth parent was the one I know about anyway. My birth mother was very religious and did sort of ask my parents to do a bit of that, and they did. I did go to church when I was a lot younger, but I have literally never held absolutely any interest in anything religious. Spiritual, that's a different story. But to me, it was always it's just more school where I learn about things and I take them or leave them. It had never had any authority to me just naturally. It was always just like, this is another thing that we're doing. I don't despise religion. I don't think it's stupid or anything, but I do think there are problems with it. And that's not because I don't like it. It's because there are objectively problems with it. So anyway, moving right along. The Hermit upright. This one is soul searching, introspection, being alone, inner guidance. Um, yeah, I think the mostly the sort of introspection, being alone, soul searching thing. Inner guidance is a little tricky. I talk a lot with people in my personal life about this idea of, how does your inner monologue with yourself or dialogue, or maybe a lot of people log, uh, English major problems. How does that sound to you? Are you talking to other people? Is it you talking to yourself? Is there nobody else with whom the conversation is occurring? How does it work? When you think about something with yourself, what's going on? What's that conversation like? To me, it is definitely talking to someone, but the person is me. And that is an extremely large part of my mental ongoing feed. A defining characteristic for me, something I think about a lot as someone who's interested in dreams, is what are the defining characteristics of me awake that are then not the case when I'm asleep? And one of them is dialogue. Is that they're awake means two people on equal footing, and asleep means those people are now no longer on equal footing. One of them is in control of the dream, and one of them is in control of the now heavily modified experience. Whereas while awake, I guess it's both it's not two people, but just the way I think about it in my head is conversing with not another me. Again, that's the complicated part. Just with myself, I guess I should say. But I would call it a dialogue for what it's worth. And being alone has always been an enormous part of my life as a human being, in a way that I feel like a lot of people would initially agree, but I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing. A lot of people are alone a lot because they were lonely. I don't really mean that. I just feel like when the most important things happen in my head when I'm by myself. And for a lot of people, I think that's not the case. I feel like many people are, their pivotal moments in life are when other people give them an idea or a form of perspective. And for most people, I think it's rather rare that they're fully open to that. And usually a pivotal moment in a person's life will be when they are suddenly, or over the course of a long buildup, open to an opinion or a perspective that they need to move forward. And then there's a moment at which they kind of get it, like it clicks. And I completely do not have that experience. I'm trying to do that all the time, and I feel like the problem for me is often that I cannot find the information that I need, or the perspective or whatever that I need. Maybe I'm just too hungry for it and I want too much of it, but that's my experience. So the upright hermit. Here's one that I'll come back to this one. Yeah, I think I'll come back to this one, but the next one I was going to say is temperance, and this is the one that I felt like I could resonate with both ways. So I think I'll do that one at the end. There's two more that I want to talk about, then I'll do that one, and then I'm going to tell you the one that Anna thinks that I am. So the next one is the devil reversed. This is releasing limiting beliefs, exploring dark thoughts, and detachment. I think it's probably worth saying at this point that because this is some random tarot website, obviously they might be a little bit different than this, so just bear with me. Again, that's why I'm telling you the information that makes me think the thing, rather than just saying, like, I liked the picture. It's like, well, there are a ton of tarot decks, so what does that mean? So releasing limiting beliefs, exploring dark thoughts, detachment. Just a very large part of my experience overall. Dark thoughts is, to me, that statement is a little silly. I kind of laugh when I read that, because it's not, I don't know. That thing that is being referred to when you say that is, to me, is just normal. It's like, you live a life without thinking about those things. I don't know what that would be like. And another reason that the devil one resonated with me is because although the reversed side is not exactly how I feel, I'm not sure I would say detached. Limiting beliefs, I mean, releasing limiting beliefs, I don't know about that. Always on the warpath to destroy any limiting beliefs. So I guess releasing. I certainly find new ones from time to time. I'm sure there are lots I haven't found, but it's just that the upright things are so not what is my experience, that I thought this one particularly caught my eye. So one of the things about the upright devil is addiction and restriction, two things that I have practically no experience with. Everybody always holds himself back sometimes, but I am so adamant about this idea of getting the best version of myself and my experience that I really don't think that many of my problems in life have been me holding myself back as long as I knew I was. Like, definitely sometimes I was and I didn't know. And then the moment I found out, I relentlessly dove away from that feeling. And addiction is something that I almost wish I could understand a little bit better, but I just don't. I feel a sort of obstinate resistance to routine, like anti-addiction. I'm addicted to not doing the same thing all the time. I often stop doing something regularly, even if it's a good thing or it's working well that way, just for the sake of not doing it that way, which to me is not the exact opposite of addiction, but is an inherent a lack of vulnerability to falling into a pattern with something that obviously I'm not perfect with. I'm sure that many of you who watch my streams every day will think, oh, but I've seen you do this sometimes. Of course, I don't mean to be absolutist about any of this. This is me talking about myself, which is always going to carry some bias. But anyway, that's the fun part of this, is you get to hear this is what I think about myself, and then you'll hear, I guess, what Anna thinks about me. Finally, the star reversed. This is lack of faith, despair, self-trust, and disconnection. Lack of faith is a huge one. Despair is a huge one. I have my very own special relationship with feeling depressed that is maybe not entirely like what other people have experienced, but I know it's similar to some people. My experience of depression is much more defined by a feeling of doom or cosmic failure is how I might even word it. This feeling of uh, I know that my life is just defined by what I think of it, and so that means if I fail, then there's no more failure. Lack of faith is a kind of goes back to the religious thing a little bit, but just I'm not so easily trusting a person. I can be a bit of a pragmatist with trust. I don't have any trouble doling out an appropriate amount of trust by my judgment, but it is often a very moderate amount of trust. This feeling uh, of not blind hope. There's nothing wrong with just being hopeful in general. There isn't, but I'm not. I To me, hope requires proof, and that is not faith. That's the exact opposite of faith. Um, Self trust also very strong. I have very little fear that I'm ever somehow not acting in my best interests because I spend a lot of time thinking about that. Of course, that opens me up to bias, but there you go. And disconnection. I interpreted that as disconnection with one's fellows, and a long term problem in my life has been feeling like I am connected to the people around me. I certainly don't feel completely unconnected, but for example, I think that a lot of people play video games socially and they find, these are all people that like the same thing I do. And so that gives me some feeling of connection. I really don't feel that way for the most part. Sometimes with all of you, I do, because we actually do share a thing in common. But to me, I actually feel uncomfortable when I'm in those environments because I think, well, now I'm in a place where everybody will assume they're on the same terms with me and not put in the legwork to find out if they are. And that bothers me. It kind of disturbs me, actually. And so I have traditionally not enjoyed gaming or any communities very much because of that. And I think because I now have a community that is centered around something that I defined myself, I feel a lot more able to open up and say, oh, I actually do share a lot of things with all of you, which is why I'm not uncomfortable talking about this topic. That's not the lack of trust that is the problem. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. Finally, we'll talk about temperance. So this is the one of all of them. I didn't really feel like I was feeling it with both sides, or the both orientations, the upright and the reversed, except for this one. And so that might not mean anything, but because you mentioned how in Persona they have this sort of character arc with the two sides of the tarot, which was actually the very first thing I was exposed to about Persona. I don't know why. I think I had a friend in college and she pitched it to me like that. It's a story where the characters are sort of based on a progression of two orientations of a major arcana of the tarot, something like that. And then I wasn't really involved with the franchise in any other way for a very long time. But yeah, so I just thought it'd be because this one resonated to me as, oh, if I was in a Persona thing, maybe it would be this. I thought I would talk about it from there. This one is a little looser though. Maybe that's telling about how close it actually is to me, but there you go. So temperance, the upright temperance is balance, moderation, patience, purpose. I mean, the card is called temperance. What do you want? And then the reverse is imbalance, excess, self healing. That's an interesting one, and realignment. Now, of course, being that I have no experience with tarot reading, it's easy for me to just intuit. Yeah, I mean, if you receive something that is temperance but upside down, what could that mean is going on with you? It doesn't mean that you're just an orb of chaos, you know. It can mean that you're in the process of focusing on a certain part of yourself over another. There's a lot of things I have to say about this. They're all pretty simple, but yeah, I mean, I believe so strongly in moderating everything, and yet I feel like a lot of my mental decisions involve consciously deciding to divert one attention to another, and sort of manually manipulate. Today, I'm going to focus more on this. Tomorrow, I'm going to focus more on this. I'm going to go from here to there. This is silly, but I play Genshin Impact, and I really like the feeling of, day to day when the different domains have different materials. I kind of like that. I think of it as, oh, today we're shifting gears to focus on preparing for Xiao. Tomorrow I'm going to focus on, Tartalia's weapon or whatever. And you're switching gears to maybe long-term investments in your account, or shorter-term power gain, something reliable versus something more random. And I like doing that. But to me, that has notes of moderation and imbalance. There's a way in which I'm purposefully misbalancing parts of my life. And I consider that to be a rather core part of my human experience that I like, but is also something I don't know if I choose, really. And I do definitely shunt my attentions around elsewhere. Many times a day, I think, I pick up my phone and I'm going to talk to a friend, and I think, okay, I'm diverting this much of my energy toward this now. How does that feel? And generally, I go ahead and do it or whatever, but it's something that I'm keenly aware of, maybe uncomfortably aware of. So this resonated with me a lot. Also because self-healing and excess are things that define my physical experience. I am a person of certain physical constitution, never broken a bone, but crippling amounts of acne, at least at sometimes in my life. It's gotten better. Lots of body pain and joint pain, and yet a prodigious runner. Like I played Humans versus Zombies in college and was very, very, very fast because my legs are long and I'm reasonably physically fit. And yet I wouldn't say that my body feels good despite that relative physical fitness, at least at the time. Certainly not as fast as I was before, I'm sure, but it's, and so I don't know. I mean, and there are just other things. Sometimes people think to themselves about what defines my experience. What is my sort of? I'll tell you where this comes from for me. In the Fate franchise, Fate Stay Night, Fate Zero, Fate Grand Order, that thing. There's this concept. I won't spoil anything about it in the series, but there's this concept called a person's origin. The idea is that this is kind of a keystone personality trait from which everything else about them kind of branches off. And characters in the Fate franchise, because we know that Kinoko Nasu writes this way, you can see how characters are more or less defined by what their origin is, / there can be a discussion made about what even is this character's origin? Do we know? There are characters for whom it's blatantly obvious, and characters for whom it's a bit obscure. There are characters for whom it's mentioned in the show, but I'm not entirely convinced, and characters for whom it isn't mentioned, but everybody who's watched that show and just heard me explain that concept knows what that character's origin is. Here's a simple example if you're familiar with the Fate franchise. What is Shiro's origin? Don't think too hard. And I think about I like that concept. I think it's a bad writing idea, personally. I think it leads to maybe a little bit oversimplified characters. Once you start thinking about it, you can't stop, and it kind of starts to bother me with the Fate franchise. But as a mental exercise, I think it's fascinating, and thinking about, what are traits that sort of overarch and define your experience. And for me, one of them is, I guess I would call overgrowth. I have body hair. My eyelashes grow way too fast, then fall out and get in my eyes every day. Every day in the shower, I kind of like get the excess eyelashes out of here. Uh, my facial hair grows extremely fast. I have what looks like a week full of facial hair in one day. I have a prodigious gut and hiccup a lot. My doctor proposes because I have a lot of bacterial activity. Not necessarily a bad thing, but certainly a loud and noticeable thing. I have a very fast metabolism. I grew a lot. I'm tall. I have long limbs. Everything about my physical experience to me is defined by overgrowth or excess. Fast regeneration, but too fast. Much, much too fast. And so that resonated with me a lot. I know that was a really roundabout way to explain why temperance reversed sort of resonated with me, and I hope it makes sense how, as a person who values balance a lot, but then who's always having this experience of, I mean, a card that is balance and imbalance is inherently going to be a thing that you're going to resonate with both sides of. Okay, maybe this doesn't mean so much. Let's get on to the end of it. And the end of it is, which one did Anna say she thought I was? She said I was the chariot upright. So this is control, willpower, success, action, and determination. How do we feel about this? Okay, well, willpower, success, action, determination, that's flattering. I don't know about control. I feel like a lot of my experience is defined by uh, thinking about just how small we really are, just how little control you have. There's a progression with YouTube that most people who do YouTube will resonate with, where you go through this progression of learning what makes videos do better, and so you feel like you have a lot of control, and then there's a later stage after that where you realize how relatively little control you have despite being aware of what control you do have. You apply the control you have, and then you realize that to some degree it's just not enough a lot of the time, and you just have to hope. And that is an experience that defines, I'm sure most people who do YouTube could relate to that. So that's a thing. I also personally, my relationship with control is that I believe very strongly in this idea that the reality of a thing is the sum of what everybody thinks of it. And so if I think one thing about my videos, but you all think something else, well, you're right, because there's way more of you. My idea is not privileged. It's just like when you read a book. If you have an interpretation and then the author says, "Oh no, but it's this," like, no, it isn't. It just says who. What cosmic authority decides that you have control over it? There's nobody has any control of anything. I don't know. And so that's interesting. I definitely think about control a lot. BDSM, the YouTube thing I mentioned before, just how nobody has control of anything. And our human society at the moment is defined by a semblance of control that is just the facade for the utter chaos behind the scenes. And so I guess I see what's going on with that. But yeah, there you go. For what it's worth, I thought I would add as a little bonus. This has been pretty long, but it was fun. That I initially forgot to tell Anna that it had to be a major arcana, and she said the King of Cups. The King of Cups. I mistook it as the Ten of Cups. The King of Cups, as the card that resonated with her for me. King of Cups, meaning tarot. I don't. The King of Cups card usually, this is from Wikipedia, usually depicts a mature man who appreciates the finer things in life, such as music and art. He can be warm-hearted and kind. The image usually has some reference to the sea or water, water being the element, it's the cup suit is the water element, yes. Interesting. Well, that's nice, isn't it? Okay, from this same questionable tarot website I was looking at. Upright King of Cups is emotionally balanced, compassionate, diplomatic. Reverse King of Cups is self-compassion, inner feelings, moodiness, and emotionally manipulative. Well, I would like to think that I'm not emotionally manipulative, but who knows? Okay, interesting. I would also argue that if maybe I don't express it, but moodiness is not so far away from. I feel like I experience a rainbow of emotions across most days of my life, whether I show it or not. So that's a thing to think about. I wanted to conclude by saying that what I like about tarot, I mentioned a lot of people in my life have been interested in tarot or exposed me to tarot in some form. What I like about tarot is that it is a kind of an interesting meditative tool. You know, you read, it's an exercise where you get perspective on yourself by having something arbitrarily declared about you, and then in my mind, the purpose is to think critically about, is that true? I think that tarot is outright harmful if you take it seriously, as is pretty much any source of authority, like I talked about before with the Hierophant reversed. You should basically never take any information at face value. I feel like that's virtually always bad, and that is excessive and radical. And I don't assert that that's the case. I'm just telling you that's my bias. And so, what's interesting to me about tarot is that it's at once a way in which, you know, maybe not the most critically thinking people in high school will go get a reading done or whatever, and then it influences their life decisions in a bad way. And at the same time, a way in which we can all just enjoy this thing in good fun and realize that it actually is really insightful if you're willing to just open up and think about what that it means to you that this thing was arbitrarily asserted about you. You don't have to immediately take it at face value. No need to figure out whether it's true or not or something. At least I don't think so. I feel like it's pretty interesting as just a mental exercise to feel out. Like, I had a lot of fun doing this one. I am very wary and uncomfortable with the idea of people taking these things as an authority, I admit, but only because I feel like that makes you miss out on such a helpful meditation tool that you could get if you were willing to just let go of the temptation to get a set answer. Because there is none. There is no such thing as a, if you don't get greedy and say, well, I want it to just be answered for me, then suddenly there's quite a lot of it almost is answered for you. There's a lot of information there. You just have to have I'm not trying to toot my horn at all. I do this wrong all the time, but you have to have I'm going to say, courage to not want a single answer, to be willing to say there isn't an answer. This is just something to think about. And personally, I think that's awesome. I enjoy that. So thank you for asking, Flipz. I hope that you had as much fun talking about this as I did.